Have you ever wondered how a simple farm story could expose the darkest truths about power and corruption? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most brilliant political allegories ever written, a book that's been banned, celebrated, and debated for over 8 decades. This isn't just another classic you were forced to read in school. This is George Orwell's masterpiece that predicted our modern world with terrifying accuracy. Published in 1945, Animal Farm emerged from George Orwell's profound understanding of totalitarian regimes and his first-hand experiences during the Spanish Civil War. Orwell crafted this deceptively simple tale during World War II, when criticising Soviet communism was incredibly controversial. Publishers initially rejected the manuscript, fearing it would offend their Russian allies. Yet Orwell persisted, knowing he had created something revolutionary. The genius of Animal Farm lies in its accessibility. Through barnyard animals, Orwell created a universal language that transcends cultural barriers. Every reader, regardless of their political background, can grasp the fundamental human truths embedded within this seemingly innocent fable. The book operates on multiple levels simultaneously, entertaining children while delivering devastating political commentary to adults. Orwell's background as a colonial policeman in Burma, his poverty in Paris and London, and his observations of Stalinist purges shaped every page. He witnessed how noble revolutionary ideals could transform into oppressive tyranny. His experiences with propaganda, censorship, and the manipulation of truth became the foundation for Animal Farm's most powerful themes. The book's enduring relevance speaks to Orwell's prophetic vision. Written decades before the internet age, it accurately predicted how information would be weaponized, how history would be rewritten, and how language itself would become a tool of control. Animal Farm isn't just historical commentary, it's a warning system for democracy itself. The story unfolds on Manor Farm, where animals live under the cruel dominion of Mr. Jones, a neglectful farmer who represents the failures of the old Russian aristocracy. The rebellion begins when Old Major, a wise boar representing Karl Marx and Lenin, delivers an inspiring speech about animal liberation. He introduces the concept of animalism, advocating for a society where all animals are equal and free from human oppression. After Old Major's death, 2 pigs emerge as leaders, Napoleon representing Stalin and Snowball representing Trotsky. They successfully overthrow Mr. Jones and establish Animal Farm based on 7 commandments, with the most important being all animals are equal. Initially, the farm thrives under collective leadership, with each animal contributing according to their abilities. The paradise quickly deteriorates as Napoleon and Snowball clash over the farm's direction. Their conflict culminates when Napoleon uses trained dogs to violently expel Snowball, marking the beginning of his totalitarian rule. Napoleon systematically dismantles the democratic principles of animalism, using propaganda, fear, and violence to maintain control. Squealer, Napoleon's propaganda minister, constantly rewrites history and manipulates statistics to justify Napoleon's increasingly authoritarian decisions. The working animals, particularly Boxer the horse, continue labouring under the false belief that their sacrifice serves the greater good. Meanwhile, the pigs gradually adopt human behaviours, sleeping in beds, wearing clothes, and walking upright. The transformation reaches its horrifying climax when the pigs invite neighbouring farmers for dinner. The other animals, watching through the farmhouse window, cannot distinguish between the pigs and humans. The final commandment has been corrupted to read all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, completing the revolution's betrayal. The rebellion against Mr. Jones represents the explosive moment when oppressed masses finally rise against their oppressors. Orwell masterfully depicts how spontaneous uprising can succeed when fueled by genuine grievances and unified purpose. The animal's initial victory demonstrates the power of collective action, but also reveals the naive assumption that removing one tyrant automatically creates freedom. This event mirrors the 1917 Russian Revolution, where centuries of Tsarist rule ended abruptly, creating a power vacuum that would be filled by equally oppressive forces. The establishment of the 7 Commandments showcases how revolutionary movements create idealistic frameworks that seem unshakable in their moral clarity. These commandments represent the pure intentions of any liberation movement, emphasizing equality, solidarity, and justice. However, Orwell reveals how even the most carefully crafted principles become vulnerable to manipulation when power concentrates in the hands of the few. The commandments' gradual corruption demonstrates how language itself becomes a weapon against the very people it was meant to protect. Snowball's expulsion marks the decisive moment when democratic ideals are abandoned for authoritarian efficiency. The conflict between Snowball and Napoleon represents the eternal struggle between inclusive leadership and dictatorial control. Snowball's windmill project symbolises progressive vision and technological advancement, while Napoleon's opposition reveals how dictators often reject beneficial changes that might threaten their power. The violent expulsion using trained dogs establishes the pattern of using force to silence opposition, a tactic that becomes central to Napoleon's rule. The gradual rewriting of the commandments represents one of Orwell's most brilliant insights into how totalitarian regimes maintain legitimacy while betraying their founding principles. Each modification is presented as necessary for the farm's survival, yet collectively they transform the revolution's meaning entirely. This process reveals how propaganda operates not through obvious lies, but through subtle shifts in language that gradually normalise previously unacceptable behaviours. The animal's inability to remember the original commandments highlights how collective memory becomes the first casualty of authoritarian rule. Boxer's fate embodies the tragic destiny of the working class under totalitarian systems. His unwavering loyalty, incredible work ethic, and simple faith in the leadership make him both the revolution's greatest asset and its most tragic victim. When Boxer becomes injured and no longer useful, Napoleon callously sells him to the glue factory while telling the other animals he's receiving medical treatment. This betrayal reveals how dictators view their supporters as disposable resources rather than valued citizens, discarding them when they become inconvenient. The pig's gradual adoption of human behaviours demonstrates how power corrupts even the most idealistic revolutionaries. Their progression from sleeping in beds to wearing clothes to walking upright symbolises the complete abandonment of their original principles. Each step is justified through squealers' propaganda, showing how corrupt leaders rationalise their hypocrisy. The pig's transformation reveals that the problem isn't specific individuals, but the corrupting nature of absolute power itself. The construction and destruction of the windmill represents the manipulation of public projects for political purposes. Napoleon initially opposes the windmill when Snowball proposes it, but later claims credit for the idea and uses its construction to rally the animals around a common goal. When the windmill is destroyed, Napoleon blames sabotage rather than acknowledging construction flaws, demonstrating how dictators deflect responsibility for their failures. The endless cycle of building and rebuilding keeps the animals focused on labour rather than questioning their leadership. The final dinner party with the human farmers represents the complete betrayal of the revolution's ideals. The pig's indistinguishability from humans reveals that they have become the very oppressors they once fought against. This scene demonstrates how revolutionary movements can evolve into systems identical to those they replaced, suggesting that the cycle of oppression continues regardless of who holds power. The watching animal's inability to distinguish between pigs and humans delivers Orwell's most devastating critique of political revolution without moral foundation. The corrupting nature of absolute power stands as Animal Farm's central lesson, revealing how even well-intentioned leaders become tyrannical when accountability disappears. Napoleon's transformation from revolutionary pig to human-like dictator demonstrates that power itself changes people, not just their circumstances. This corruption occurs gradually through small compromises and self-justifications, making it nearly invisible to both leaders and followers. The lesson warns against trusting any system that concentrates power without checks and balances, regardless of the leader's initial intentions or ideological purity. The manipulation of language emerges as perhaps the most insidious tool of control, showing how words can be weaponized to reshape reality itself. Squealer's constant reinterpretation of events and gradual modification of the commandments reveals how propaganda operates through subtle linguistic shifts rather than obvious lies. This manipulation succeeds because it exploits people's trust in authority and their desire for simple explanations. The takeaway emphasizes the critical importance of protecting language from political corruption and maintaining independent sources of information. The danger of blind loyalty becomes evident through Boxer's tragic fate, illustrating how unquestioning devotion enables tyranny rather than preventing it. Boxer's motto, "Napoleon is always right," represents the abdication of personal judgment that dictators depend upon for survival. His eventual betrayal reveals how leaders exploit loyal followers' trust while viewing them as expendable resources. This lesson teaches the importance of maintaining critical thinking and holding leaders accountable, even when doing so feels uncomfortable or disloyal. The cyclical nature of oppression demonstrates how revolutionary movements can reproduce the very systems they sought to destroy. The pig's transformation into human-like oppressors suggests that changing the identity of rulers doesn't necessarily change the fundamental power dynamics. This cycle continues because the structural problems that enable oppression remain unaddressed while attention focuses on removing specific individuals. The lesson emphasizes the need for systemic change rather than simply replacing one set of leaders with another. The vulnerability of collective memory shows how historical truth becomes the first casualty of authoritarian rule. The animal's inability to remember the original commandments or accurately recall past events enables Napoleon's rewriting of history. This manipulation succeeds because it exploits the natural limitations of human memory and the tendency to trust authority figures. The takeaway highlights the importance of preserving historical records and maintaining independent institutions that can verify truth claims. The power of propaganda reveals how emotional manipulation can override rational thought and factual evidence. Squealer's techniques of selective statistics, emotional appeals, and constant repetition demonstrate how propaganda shapes perception more effectively than logical argument. His success depends on exploiting the animal's fears, hopes, and cognitive biases rather than presenting accurate information. This lesson teaches the importance of media literacy and critical evaluation of information sources. The importance of education emerges as a crucial defense against tyranny, as the pig's superior literacy enables their rise to power. The other animal's inability to read or remember the commandments makes them vulnerable to manipulation and lies. Napoleon's decision to limit education to the pigs reveals how knowledge becomes a tool of control rather than liberation. This takeaway emphasizes that democratic societies require educated citizens capable of independent thought and informed decision-making. The role of fear in maintaining control demonstrates how dictators use violence and intimidation to suppress opposition. Napoleon's use of dogs to enforce his will shows how physical force backs up propaganda and ideological control. The public executions and constant threat of violence create an atmosphere where questioning authority becomes literally dangerous. This lesson reveals how authoritarian systems depend on fear to prevent organised resistance and maintain their power. The gradual erosion of rights shows how freedoms disappear through incremental changes rather than sudden revolutions. Each modification to the commandments seems reasonable in isolation, but collectively they transform the entire system. This process succeeds because people adjust to small changes and lose sight of the larger pattern of degradation. The takeaway warns against complacency and emphasizes the need for vigilance in protecting democratic institutions and individual rights. Animal Farm endures as a masterpiece because it captures timeless truths about human nature and political power that transcend any specific historical context. Orwell's genius lies in creating a story that feels both universal and urgently relevant to each new generation of readers. The book's power comes not from its historical accuracy, but from its psychological insight into how ordinary people become complicit in their own oppression. The relevance of Animal Farm has only intensified in our digital age, where information can be manipulated instantly and collective memory becomes increasingly fragmented. Social media algorithms create echo chambers that mirror Squealer's propaganda techniques, while political leaders worldwide employ the same tactics Napoleon used to maintain power. The book serves as both warning and instruction manual for recognizing and resisting authoritarian tendencies. Reading Animal Farm today feels like discovering a prophetic text that anticipated the challenges facing modern democracy. Orwell's insights into the corruption of language, the manipulation of truth, and the exploitation of loyalty remain as relevant now as they were in 1945. The book reminds us that freedom requires constant vigilance and that the price of liberty is eternal skepticism toward those who seek power over others.